a cold and windy Sunday afternoon, so what better thing to do than give you a video lecture on personal property, bailments, and insurance. And we're only going to do personal property, so this will be part 1, and we will cover this on Monday. First, we need to look at a little bit of terminology. We have accession, which means to add value to something, and there are some situations where when you add value to a product, you may become an owner of that property. So that's called accession. There's a really great word here. I love this word, chattel. And chattel is just a very fancy way of saying all forms of personal property. But that's a great word, isn't it? Confusion is not confusion per se, but confusion is a mixing together of goods that belong to two or more owners, but they all become mixed together, sort of like a grain elevator. When the farmers take in the grain, all of their grain gets put together, but yet they still own a certain portion of it. A stray statute, an interesting word. It's a sort of a finder's rights, where if you find something and the true owner is never found, the item you found is yours. And then a fee simple, such interesting words, is it's an absolute form of property, of ownership. It means you own that property. You can own that property for your lifetime. You have full rights to it, full use to it, and you can dispose of it any way you want to. And upon your death, it passes on to your heirs. So that's called fee simple. Joint tenancy. I'll get it out in a minute. Kind of different ways to own and hold property. This means that you hold property jointly. You can have community property, which you hold property jointly, but if something were to happen, it would be split down the middle, or there would be a 50-50 split. And concurrent ownership is shared ownership rights. A more formal way of looking at community property, it's a form of concurrent ownership. Community property happens in many states in marriages or in a common law marriage. You've probably heard that term before. So those are some of the words we're going to be playing with. I'll come back to some of them. They're used later on in part 2 and 3. But let's look at property ownership. And basically what we're saying is you hold title to that property. It is yours, such as a car. You have a title for your car. You have an abstract for your house. You have a deed for your house. Everything that you own, if you hold title and have control of it, in a bill of sale, it is your property. Two types. There's real and personal property. Real property is land and everything that's attached to it, i.e., trees, rocks, airspace, mineral rights. That would be real property. Personal property are anything that isn't real property, I guess you could say. And it has a bundle of rights, which is that fee simple. Remember we talked about that up here? Which means you have the right to possess it, the right to use it, and the right to dispose of it. And you can dispose of it in any shape, way, or form that you wish. You can sell it, you can give it as a gift, or any other means that you can think of to dispose of it. You can burn it if you wish. But those are your bundle of rights. And upon death, your heirs would gain the same rights you had in that case. Kinds of ownership. There's concurrent ownership, which means two or more are involved here. And tenancy in common. You have undivided interest, and let's say there are two of you. If one of you die, the person who dies, their heirs inherit their half. Now that's tenancy. If you have joint tenancy, that means you have undivided interest, and the death, if one of you dies, the property passes to the other one, not to the heirs, but to the other one. If that type of property is passed on as a gift, okay, it stays joint tenancy. And then we have community property, and that's usually by marriage, and that's 1/2 interest in the property. And that becomes very important on how property is dispersed during a divorce. And it looks like we might have a question. I have a question mark there. So I shall meet you in acquiring ownership and of personal property. And you go do your little question. Welcome back. I hope the question was good. Ways that we're going to acquire personal property. You can acquire it by possession, which means a good example is a wild animal, or something that is not owned by anybody, that is free in nature, and you acquire it. You can, it could be abandoned property that nobody was claiming. That's acquiring by possession. You can acquire by production, which means you can build it, create it, such as writers, artists, or you could acquire a house by building it. And it lists things here as inventions, songs, writings, things that you create by production. You can acquire it by gifts, and a gift is voluntary transfer of property, which means you willingly give it. We never think of a gift of needing to meet a certain criteria, but it really does. It has to be a donation. It has to be delivered to a donor or a donee by the donor, maybe. It has to be accepted by the donee. And the donor must give up complete dominion and control. So you can't give a car to, let's say, your spouse, and then still maintain control of it, or you can't give a car to your child. That might be better. And say it's all yours, but then never let them drive it, and you're the only one that has control of it. So that's giving up dominion and control. You can actually acquire something by accession. We talked about that up here, where you add value to the property and it becomes yours. So sometimes you'll find an old car, and somebody will say, well, if you fix it up and make it all red and everything, you can just have it. That's adding, or that's acquiring by accession. And then finally there's acquiring by confusion, and I kind of talked about that. That's commingling property. An example would be grain. How about gasoline? It all gets mixed together, oil, but you own a certain amount of it at the refinery. So that's ways of acquiring personal property. We have another question. And I'm going to go up and lollygag around the mislaid, lost, and abandoned property until you get back. Ready? Here we go. Now, this is how you can, what you can do with property sometimes if you lose it. You can mislay it, you can lose it, or you can abandon it, or find abandoned property. Mislaid property is simply if you laid your cell phone on the desk and walked out, and I saw it, and I knew you would be back, so I would become a caretaker of your cell phone until you get back, until you claim it. Lost property is something that's involuntarily left and has been there for a while. If you find it, you have a claim against it, against the whole world, except for the true owner. So if the true owner comes back and says, "Oh, yeah, I'm so glad you found my phone," or if you turn in an envelope at the lost and found and it's not claimed, but if it is claimed, then you lose rights. But if it's not claimed, nobody else in the world can claim it, except for the true owner. You have conversions, owner known or not contacted. I think that's called theft. You find a cell phone, or let's say you find a laptop, you know whose it is, but you say, well, they left it here, it's mine now, and I'm not going to take it back to it. That's called conversion, theft. Stray statutes where it's finders keepers if the true owner is never found, and we talked about that one up here also. So some of these we've covered before. Abandoned property, something is discarded by the true owner, and the finder claims the title to it. Sometimes happens in, I'm trying to think, ships or boats. When I was in South Carolina, you would have a boat wash up on the dock or on the beach, and if nobody claimed it within a certain amount of time, it was considered abandoned, and you could claim that boat. So you will find that, and there's several ways for that to happen. So a question, and we are at the end of part 1. We will continue with bailments, and then we will go on down and look at insurances after that. So go do your question, and I will see you on Monday. Thank you.